In this video, I will share my Bitcoin cycle price target. I will talk about the potential altcoin run-up and where it may end. And I will share some more macro knowledge to know where we may be heading in the first quarter of 2025. Let's dive straight into the content. As I have shared in the latest video, since the Trump election, we see a lot of tailwinds for cryptocurrency because the Trump administration is very pro-crypto. If we look at the current price post-halving, then we can see, if we make a comparison to other cycles, that we are not yet that very far. We have just only recently crossed the 100k level, and we are now hovering around that price target. And as you can see, we see diminishing returns in the first cycle. We had more gains in the second peak than the third peak. So it would be really conservative to think, yes, okay, we will see another diminishing return being activated, and we could see lesser higher peaks, and we should aim somewhere between 100 and 200k, but we are only right now at the underside of that target when you compare it to previous cycles. If you look at Bitcoin, then you can see a logarithmic curve, and as I posted about earlier, we are still in a macro uptrend, and you can see that on the RSI as well. RSI is trending up from the green support level all the way up to its resistance in red, and we are not yet at previous cycle peaks when we extrapolate top to top. We are also still in a clear RSI uptrend because we have not broken the trend line either. As you can see, whenever we see a cycle top, we see the RSI also breaking its monthly uptrend levels to the downside, and we have not seen that this cycle just yet, as we have seen in prior cycles. So that really confirms that we are still, as of now, in a bull market globally. When we look at the total market cap excluding Bitcoin and Ethereum, then we can see a similar picture. So we have had a prior high on the RSI being touched, but I mentioned in my previous video that this would likely be only a mid-cycle top. It makes most sense because we trended up very rapidly, but we did not cross all-time highs as we have done so prior. And keep in mind that this is a logarithmic chart. So in the cycle of 2018, altcoin market was roughly around 300 billion. The next peak that we saw was around 1 trillion. And as you can see clearly, we broke out of our triangle to the upside, and we are now only just testing those prior highs that we have seen in the cycle of 2021. I expect altcoins to continue upwards and test new highs. They are likely to move into my green box on top. It does not matter if you use a logarithmic regression to calculate a potential peak or if you use a trend line. I believe that we could see prices of roughly 2 to 4 trillion for the altcoin market cap, and it is clear that we have not peaked just yet. We have only scraped prior all-time highs right now, and there's a lot of room for expansion. When we take another look at the logarithmic cycle, but we use the logarithmic MACD, which is a strong momentum signal, then we can see that we are only just expanding. So every halving is mentioned on the line, and every time the halving occurs, we see the MACD lines cross positive. And as soon as they do, we see a run-up happening. And this time is no different. We have just only crossed 1 or 2 months ago, and we are now seeing our expansion move. I do not believe that we have concluded that move just yet because we have not reached the resistance line in red just yet. The blue line is still over the red line, which is also another confirmation that we are still in an uptrend. As soon as we see a crossover being confirmed on the weekly chart, so that it takes 7 days to confirm, then we have likely seen a mid-cycle or a full cycle peak. As soon as we cross over right now, as we have crossed above 100k, we are in the cyclical peak target area. I do believe chances are high that this will confirm a cycle peak as well, but we are not there just yet. When we look at the basic Elliott waves, which has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 waves before it goes into a bear market, then we can see we could still see some more expansion. This is an older chart, but I left it like this because then you can clearly see what is also my expectation, which I have been sharing on social medias like X. And we are currently seeing a break of the 100k level, we see a retracement, and I personally believe we will see one more push to the upside. That push to the upside could be really violent, but it could also be very weak. We will have to see how that plays out. If you have made it this far in this video, then please give me a like and subscribe and support our channel. Thank you very much and have a great day. If we look at Bitcoin and we look at the macro conditions, which I will share at the end of the video, then it is very clear that we are moving to an area at least between 100 and 120k. I have been broadcasting this move ever since at the start of 2023, and this is roughly what I expected to happen, and where I also expect a cyclical peak to potentially occur. I have always said that considering what is happening in the macro markets, it would be wise to have a very conservative Bitcoin target. I personally believe that the 1.6 and the 2.0 Fibonacci extension levels, they get hit very often. And that would probably conclude us breaking the 100k, retracing lower and having our final push upwards. Does that imply we cannot move higher? No, it does not. But considering I want to play very conservative because there are a lot of headwinds in the macro and in equities, I believe that 100 to 120k is a very solid Bitcoin target for this cycle. Let's look at some other metrics. Is the MVRV score. If we look at prior cycle peaks, then we can see that the red line shows clearly the Z-score peaking. And every time when it reaches the resistance in red, we can see a cyclical peak. Now you do have to notice that last cycle peak, we merely just touched the red area. And with the second peak being higher, the Z-score already trended down quite a lot. That is why so many people believe that this was the actual cycle peak, because so many metrics pointed to this being the end of the cycle. We can see that we are still pretty low. We are still sitting around 3 on a scale of 10, which is really low. But let's look at it from this way. So prior we reached around 10, 9 to 10, but last cycle we undercut that. We moved from 10 to 7, which means that we have a weaker high. And I personally believe that chances are high that we will not make it into the red this time. There are so many people looking at these on-chain metrics that I believe that things will play out differently and things will likely be front run. So I am expecting a number of between 4 and 6 to be the cyclical peak this time. We are still sitting below that 4, which is my minimum. So I would not call a cyclical peak for Bitcoin just yet, or for altcoins, because we still have a lot of room to move, I believe. Let's take another look at this indicator, which is the Pi cycle top indicator. It is composed of the 110 moving average and the 350 moving average. And as soon as the yellow line crosses the red one, then it signals a cyclical peak. This indicator has a track record of roughly 100%, calling at least cyclical peaks. So we can use it with high probability. And as we can see right now, we still have some more room to move to the upside because, yeah, we are not crossing just yet. This would also imply that the Bitcoin price still has some more room to move to the upside. Let's take another look at what happened recently. As I posted on my X profile as well, you can clearly see that we spent roughly 7 months in a consolidation. After that consolidation, we pushed to the upside. And well, I have to be honest, the push to the upside has been only 40%, which is not a lot. Typically, we see massive moves in the fourth quarter, and perhaps it could be delayed going into Q1, but I do not believe that whenever we see a break of prior all-time high, we see a consolidation of 7 months, that we only see a push up of 40%. I would assume that we would see a bigger push than only 40%. We have a Trump pro-crypto environment, which is really big because the US sets the standard for the rest of the world. We have a lot of tailwinds from the ETFs, and we see that there is a lot of talk about the strategic reserve. We see companies wanting to build Bitcoin on their balance sheet in order to get more profits. So this kind of narrative is really important. It's one of the biggest things that happened in crypto ever. And I do not believe that it concludes only with a 40% rally. I do believe, though, that most people are aiming way too high. And do not forget that whenever a cycle concludes, it concludes in euphoria. And we are seeing a lot of good news right now. So my personal opinion is that we could likely see more upsides, but not as much as most people think. So we will likely be somewhere in between the bull and bear extreme. What am I expecting us going forward? I said many times on my social media that the fourth quarter is an unusually strong quarter for crypto as a whole, and we have seen a lot of altcoin appreciation in the fourth quarter already. I do believe that altcoins will continue to expand, as I said earlier, because we are only right now breaching our prior highs, so we will make a significant move higher, and I also believe that we could see much higher targets before the cycle ends. Depending on basically where we are in the cycle, I do believe that we could make our way until the 2 to 4 trillion market cap, excluding Bitcoin and Ethereum. If you have watched my previous videos about the altcoin sectors and coins that I prefer, then you would already be in a good profit, because real-world assets, artificial intelligence and layer 1 coins have been driving upwards strongly since I made that video a month ago. So let's take one more look at the altcoin market through another lens, and this is the logarithmic growth curve as it is originally made by Trollolo and updated by AXP on X. Shout out to him and thank you for providing us with this information. And if you look at the altcoin market cap right now, then you can clearly see that we went from a must buy undervalued valuation, and that the fair value is also hovering around the 4 trillion mark, and overvaluation is even sitting at 13 trillion. Now, I personally believe that there is a high chance we see diminishing returns occur, and when we look at the percentages of that, in the first cycle we had 5,000% above the trend line, which was a very strong cycle. The second cycle was a lot less strong because so many more altcoins entered the market as well, and we only went 400% above the trend line, and I do believe that we may only make it back to the average fair value trend line this time. As I said before, I expect roughly around 4 trillion to be a level where altcoins trade to. I do not expect us to move all the way up. That would mean that we see a massive inflow, a massive cycle into altcoins, which I personally believe is less probable right now. That still means that altcoins could see a big up move, and they could still expand massively from here. Let's also take a look at the biggest altcoin in the space. The biggest altcoin in the space is Ethereum. Looking at Ethereum, we clearly see that we have only traded around fair value ever since we have seen the cycle low. And I also see the same trend occurring with Ethereum. The first cycle we saw 900% above the fair valuations. The second cycle 300. So it would make a lot of sense that this cycle divided by 3 once again gives us a number which is 100% overvaluation. And we have only went up until 55%, which basically means that we can still double. Ethereum is currently sitting at 4K, and it is my projection that price will end between 6 to 10,000 per Ethereum, depending on how much traction altcoins get this cycle. Now, there's only one thing that remains, and that is the macro markets. And I want to point out the trend of which the data is moving at. If you have listened to Powell's latest speech, then you clearly know know his language is changing. We are currently seeing inflation ticking back up near the end of the year, and today is another number which they expect to tick up to 2.7%. And that means that if inflation is picking back up, we also see PMI from manufacturing and services being a mixed signal. We also see that one of the two yield curves already moved positive this quarter, and the other one is hovering near 0%, which may trigger a signal as well. And the Fed funds rate is likely to drop again next week because we currently have a 86% certainty of that. If you can see one thing in this economic data, then it is deterioration. And I have been calling this for a very long time. I said that at the latest in September or October, we would see the start of deterioration, and we have on cue. Since September, we really see significant red numbers, which means that the economy is slowing. Things are turning around. While we still see a lot of mixed signals, because we still see high equity prices, we still see a lot of strength because company earnings are also running strong. GDP is also still positive. The yield curve of the 10 versus 3 month is still negative. We do see a trend, and the trend is that things are slowing. People are struggling, and it is getting harder. So it is still my expectation that in 2025 there is a likely big chance that we roll over into what is called a recession, or that at the very least we see significant price corrections occurring after the big run-ups of this year. So that is the core reason why I want to have conservative crypto targets. While the crypto cycle could be very strong and we could move up massively, I also believe that there is a lot of headwinds because macro and global liquidity, they dictate the global crypto movements. And so far, there is a lot of headwind and potential troubles ahead of us. My personal approach is that I want to scale out a lot of risk on conservative targets and let some of that profit run in case that the market does play out strongly. Overall, we could still see a lot of performance ahead of us, so let's end it with that. I truly believe that we can still see a massive move in altcoins and that we see a strong market going into the beginning of 2025 and likely see a strong market until the end of Q1 at the very least. That is at least my expectation right now, and I will give you guys some new updates later on.